Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're going to be talking about something near and dear to me and scary to me still, but nevertheless, we're moving forward because we are living in the age of AI. So if you feel comfortable, just share in the chat so everybody kind of knows who's here. Just let us know what industry you're in and tell us why you care. Tell your fellow participants why you care about this topic. It's hard not to care given that we're being bombarded constantly by what's happening in AI and how it's changing lives and how it's impacting workplaces. It's hard not to care. So go ahead and just say what industry you're in and why you care about this topic. Let me see here. I just wanted to see what was happening in the chat. Our community is getting left behind. Wow, training, will my job be eliminated? Welcome, Alabama State. Federal government and the concern of being replaced. Neuroscientists had to retrain to adapt and integrate AI into lab functions. Future computer science major, design and job security. So what I'm seeing is, as I expected, we have a vast variety of people in our audiences who come from different places, but we're all converging on this spot at this time. And so in some cases, it kind of doesn't matter how much experience you have. It's kind of like we're starting from scratch. So I'm hoping you will leave the session with some very specific tools. I'm going to share a little bit of my experience with AI, how I came to be even in this role doing this kind of work. And I am looking forward to, following up the session and kind of certainly sharing the slides, but also fleshing out the framework I'm going to cover, the actions 1, 2, and 3 when in actual worksheets. It turns out there's a little bit of research behind the fact that the more tech heavy we get is the more people actually are wanting to go back to, give me a workbook so I can just sit and just work through these things and have time to think and not be distracted by everything else on my phone or on my computer. So I can't help it. I can't help it. That Caribbean accent will show up. Let's see how higher education is going to be affected. Let's see, secondary education, lots of educators in the room. So, okay, let's just get started. We had asked when people were registering for folks to tell us why they care about this topic. And there was a lot of, but some common themes, and we're going to cover some of what those common themes were. Just a little bit about me. I'm the founder and the CEO at the HBCU Career Center, and we've been doing innovative programming for 15 years. This year was 15 years. And so I've worked myself either in higher education or in the HR industry, but I've worked in travel, aviation, higher ed, technology, and the public sector. I'm a researcher on workplace automation through artificial intelligence technology, and I'll tell you a little bit about my doctoral work. And I am part of the Forbes HR Council, 100 Brilliant Women in AI Ethics that I'm really, really proud of, because our goal is to stay on top of some of these changes, make sure people are included. And I am an inclusive HR influencer. Our agenda this evening, I'm going to do a disclaimer right up front. Then I'm going to share maybe the big group of questions that came in. We actually have over 500 people who registered for this session. So I know people will either get participate today or get the recording tomorrow, but you'll see some of the questions that people were asking as they kind of came into the room. Shout out to my assistant who put all of our graphics together for this evening. And you can tell that they're generated by AI. She's an artist herself. So it's an interesting thing that an artist would have to use AI to, put something like this together, but that's the point, right? That's the point. That's where we're headed. I'm going to share a little bit of my perspective, action items 1, 2, and 3, and then I'm going to share a framework that I think everybody can use to kind of handle their AI exposure moving forward. My disclaimer, this is not a technology session. By no means is this a technology session. I do have an associate's degree in electronic engineering technology, and I was writing code way before people were talking about code, but that's not my expertise. My expertise is in how people handle change and how it is that our workplace and workforce changes, because I have a committed, vested interest in making sure the HBCU community, and by extension, Black people in America, are not left behind with all the changes that are happening. So some of the early questions that we got: how will AI change my work, my career, and my industry? How do I manage the fear? And the fear is actually real. How do I stay ahead? What future skills are going to be in demand? And the impact of AI, both in personal ways, in terms of people worried about, what's going to happen with their jobs, or their jobs secure, how can they change? But social media, organizational impact. People care about, how's my workplace going to evolve? Social impact. Who's going to get left behind? I saw somebody mention that already in our chat. Who's going to get left behind? How are different demographic groups going to react to AI and find their own place and voice in the AI conversation? And the nature of the technology, the relative advantage of the technology, and why it is that businesses for sure are adopting AI tools and methodologies at the rate that they're doing it. So AI definition, big picture, again, not a technology session. I'm using 2 definitions here, one from IBM, one from a author who writes about ethical machines. It's super simple. It's really a fancy word, machine learning, and all it means is software that learns by example. IBM's definition: artificial intelligence leverages computers and machines to mimic the problem-solving and decision-making capabilities of the human mind. That's what we do all day. As humans, we're problem-solving, we're making decisions. And so we have these tools that are supposed to be able to assist us with decision-making and problem-solving capabilities. You can see why industry would be attracted to it. Generative AI, which is the, ChatGPT comes to mind. When you look at that definition, it's deep learning models that can generate high quality text, images, like the ones that we're using in this presentation, and other content based on the data that they were trained on. So 2 things. One, I want you to remember, this one talked about learning by example, and this one talks about data that they were trained on. What we're going to find out is that we're the ones who've been doing the training, actually. So we've actually been in the game. My perspective, as I shared earlier, I've worked in the aviation airline industry. I started my career as an air traffic controller. I spent 4 years as an air traffic controller. I transitioned and I went into flight school. So from a very early on in my career, I was always exposed to technology. Did I want to fix the radar? No. Was I interested in how they built the radar? No. But I was interested in how people adopted and changed as technology evolved. I left the travel industry actually because I was given the opportunity, or I seized the opportunity to work remotely because of a major advance that had taken care of in the travel industry. And I can tell you a little bit more about that later. I moved into higher education where I worked in college career centers that was just transformed again by technology. The aviation industry, the airline industry, that had just a major overhaul, where the Expedias and the Pricelines and the Booking.coms came on board and really, really competed with travel companies or travel agencies. Then I moved from higher education into human resources. At some point, these always overlapped for me, and I've always been an entrepreneur. So when I was working in higher education, I was running the HBCU Career Center. When I'm running the HBCU Career Center, I'm still working with higher education partners in college career centers. As I've moved through those different professions, especially from aviation to higher ed, and then higher ed career centers into human resources, I noticed the responses that different people had to the changes that were happening with technology. I worked in career centers where career counselors would say, there is no way technology can do what we do. And then I went into the career center and started doing remote career counseling, remote career coaching, making appointments and working with people via the phone, via email. That was a foreign concept. And so I've always noticed how it is that different people react when these changes happen. And I've seen people get left behind. And sometimes, yes, it's because the business didn't care, but a lot of the times it's because us as humans, we really push back on change. We really resist change. And so when I worked in human resources and I realized what was happening in human resources, it made sense to me that, oh, I need to go study this push that I'm seeing in HR to introduce AI in hiring and recruiting and other human resource practices. And that's what pushed me into going to do my doctorate and doing my research work 5 years ago, and ended up with a dissertation regarding, the use of AI in hiring and recruiting, and what the HR professionals themselves who were involved in the change, what their perspectives were, what were their attitudes and perspectives. So regarding the change, you always see people who are curious. Oh, this is great new, this is a cool thing, let me try it. You have those people who, they'll stand in line when a new phone comes out. You have those people who are saying, oh, I don't just like it, I want to get in there. I want to get in and work in that area. You have people who change careers because they feel they're being left behind by their careers. And so, they want to quit before the job quits them. You have the tweakers who are, let me just learn this new thing so I can just stay moving. And you have the change agents, the people who say, you know what, I want to be able to find a space and secure a space for myself. So I'm going to fully participate in this change. On the other hand, you have the Luddites. And I don't know if you know anything about the Luddites. That's the term that's used for people who are generally technophobic. And HR, and I'm not speaking out of school here, among our HR community, we are generally technophobic. We, are usually the last folks inside of the organization that wants to change the technology that we have. And one of the reasons is because we know it's going to impact lives. And we're juggling so many things, we really don't have time to commit to making the change while we're still handling and working for our people. So the Luddites were actually a group of people who worked in textile manufacturing back in the 19th century. And when companies started to bring automation, machinery into textile manufacturing, some of these employees would literally go in at night and destroy the equipment. So that's just the term that's been given. It's, are you a Luddite? Are you somebody who just doesn't want to see change? Not only do you not want to see it, you will do everything you can to push back on it. You have the naysayers, oh, this is not going to work. This is not going to help me. This is going to give me more work than I had before. You have the hypers, people who they're excited about the technology. They just want to talk about it, but they really don't want to do the work to integrate. You have those people who will say, no, you can use it, but not me. My job doesn't require me to do it. Not my job. My job does not require me. I have carved out this little area and my job does not require me to do this. You have those folks who will say, I'm just going to hang in there until retirement. I want to just stay below the radar. And one of the reasons is because there's huge fear about starting over. And then you have those folks who are we're just going to wait it out. We've seen this hype before. So I'll just wait for the next thing, but I'm not getting excited about this. That is applying right now to this AI transition. And so my action item number 1 that I want for you to walk away with is that you have to consistently be scanning the environment to learn what is happening so that you can define your role in the changes. This is how you don't get left behind. You have to stay aware of what is happening. And I'll give you an example. I shared earlier that I saw some changes coming into the HR function. And this was one of the things I noticed. Deloitte does an annual human capital trends report. And back in 2017, I realized that talent acquisition, in other words, trying to find people to do work, 81% of the chief HR officers said that that was really important or that was very important to them. But a new line came into that annual survey. I would watch that every year. And here was a new thing called robotics, cognitive computing, and AI. And already in 2017, 40% of the senior leadership said that this was important or very important to them. By 2018, that number had grown to like 63%. So I saw this rapid change happening. And so I said, well, I'm in the HR business. I realized that companies, this is back in 2017 again, here's how companies are spending on AI. Facebook was spending $60 million. Uber was spending $680 million, Microsoft $690, Intel, Apple, Amazon, Google was spending $3.9 billion. Well, for me, that's a ding, 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 ding. Somebody's putting money into this. They're not putting it in there because they're not doing anything. They're putting it in there because this is where we're heading. And so for me, that was a clear sign that, okay, I'm in the HR function. I care about employment, hiring. We run the HBCU Career Center. We're constantly guiding people about what the future looks like. Why would this not be something that I need to pay attention to? So I decided that this was going to be my research. And I was going to focus on how these 4 things came together: how workplace automation, employees' personal attitudes, organizational change, and human resources came together. I was looking for that, what I call that sweet spot, right in the middle, where all those things converge, because that meant all of the requirements that I needed personally to figure out where this was going. Fast forward 2022. And by 2022, we've had a pandemic, which has now impacted the speed at which we make changes. So even 5 years ago, when I was looking ahead and we were thinking about where we would be in 5 years, here comes a pandemic and we just accelerate through the pandemic. And it's even more significant. The changes are more significant. But guess what? We've actually been participating in the change already. In real life, here are just some of the ways that we already participate in AI. Earlier, the 2 definitions, they talked about training the technology. Well, that's what we've been doing. We've been training the technology with our social media and our Amazons and our speech recognition and image recognition and using virtual assistants like Alexa and Siri. We've been there. We've been there. We've been in it all along, but we haven't actually been owners in it. Other people have been using the data, but we have been very willing participants in the change and in the adoption. And why would you think that is? Oh, cool. Somebody just shared the 2023 global human capital strengths report. If you're an HR professional, if you're a leadership professional, you have to actually read that. Yes, Dr. Geddes, awareness of future investment areas is prophetic. If you see where they're spending money, then you know there is something there that has to, Luddites. I will use that moving forward. Thanks for sharing the Deloitte Human Capital Trends Report. And if you're an employee, if you're a worker, like all of us are, whether we're working for ourselves or we're working for other people, you want to know what the upper level, the decision makers are doing regarding how they're making decisions inside of industries to spend money. So I would say that one of the reasons why we're using these tools is because we're surrounded by them. And in many cases, they make our lives easier. They really do. They allow us to do things that we weren't able to do before. Years ago, and I don't want to date myself, I mean, the gray hair gives me away, but years ago, if you were at home and you had, you wanted to make a photocopy of something, you'd probably say, oh, I'm going to make a photocopy when I go into the office. Well, it turns out that even with our smartphones, some of us have smarter technology available to us at home than we do in our workplaces. We get into our workplaces and it's like, oh my gosh, when are they going to change this? Because you can do more on your phone sometimes than you can do in your office. So we've participated. I am just going to encourage us to take that one step further and do more, not just be a participant, but actually own my attitudes and my perspectives and know what is driving them. For me, I kind of knew about ChatGPT before ChatGPT kind of exploded on the scene in November of 2022. And all of a sudden, you have people thinking, oh my God, it's the final countdown. Well, they didn't start working on ChatGPT in 2022. They started working on it back in 2018. OpenAI started working on it in 2018. So this new rush and this new passion that we have, I think it's really exciting that more people are engaged, but know that just like they started working on ChatGPT, back in 2018 and had version 1, 2, 3, and now 4, they're working on things right now that we're going to have to play catch up with. So we can get into a mode where it's, oh, is it the final countdown? Or is it like, whoa, it's a festival of lights. And I just see opportunities. I just see things being illuminated. And I need to figure out where it is that I am going to fit in this change. And so part of making that decision is to understand that your attitude towards AI, your perspectives about AI comes from somewhere. In a lot of cases, it comes from fear of what's going to happen to my job, what's going to happen to my ability to sustain myself and my families. And so as an employee inside of an organization, it's well known that our attitudes can be determined by a worker's perception of how the technology is going to impact their specific jobs and careers. And so we're thinking not only about how it's going to impact us, we're thinking about how it's going to impact our children, how it's going to impact our spouses or our partners, their lives, their careers. And so that's why I wanted to do this session, to say AI isn't happening to us. we are active participants in it. And there are some things that we're going to want to make sure the purveyors, the designers, the developers get right. And that requires a certain amount of vigilance from us as participants. I wanted to introduce this slide because this was part of the result of my research. I talked to human resources professionals, but even within human resources professionals, there are different groups of people. So I know a coach that I know is in our audience, and I know even in her organization, there are different layers of employees. You know, if I went into an athletics department, I'd find coaches, I'd find assistant coaches, I'd find equipment managers, I might find admin folks. So everybody is looking at the same thing and having a different perspective. Some of our personal attitudes and perspectives, the things that emerged in my research were excitement about it, curiosity, huge trust component, concerns about with trust of AI technology, fear, and the overwhelming majority of everybody was coping. People made more statements that were about coping with the change. And my perspective is always, let's do a little bit more than cope. And I'll show you how in a minute, but let's do a little bit more than cope. But I wanted to bring your attention to the red R. The three groups of people that I talked to inside of the HR profession were HR executives, HR recruiters, and HR information systems folks. These were the folks, the IT folks who would be installing the systems, setting up the systems, implementing the systems, training on the systems. And I wanted to bring your attention to the HR recruiter, who is really on the front end of hiring. They demonstrated no excitement about the technology and about what could happen in their area and with their specific roles. And that's one of the things that we have to watch for is how close are we to that point where the change is going to be made, and recognize that that might amp up our anxiety. But it also means that we may have to do more work to actually pivot. So when you're looking inside of, for example, just the HR function, you'll see that, you know, of course, the executive is excited about it because they're seeing the analytics that are, you know, pinpointing where in the country they can find, you know, a certain kind of talent, what kind of salaries will that require, you know, depending on where they are, what kind of one of the companies that I spoke to is on a Fortune 50 company, huge managed service company, and has these locations throughout the US. And they were using their data to actually pinpoint where in the country they could put another one of their sites because, you know, labor cost would be lower. They know the graduation rates of the, you know, the high schools, and therefore who would be available, what the talent pool was like. It really started as a push to find the appropriate talent. And so what you're going to find is people who are close to the change might have, you know, their perspectives of the change, we have to understand might be a little bit more challenging. Now, in terms of who is closest to the change, for a long time, we would hear that it would be low-skilled roles that could be impacted by AI. AI is going to, you know, take away low-skilled jobs. Well, I want to, this is an art project that I use AI art to do. I put in 15, 16 images of myself, you know, headshots, selfies of myself. And I state that I'm looking for, they're creating avatars of me, and I want it to be historical. And so one of the things that I realized in the over 100 images that it kicked back to me in 30 minutes is when they don't know what to do with my hair, AI puts the hat on it. So, or they can go really historical, or for a Black person like myself, really new. Like you'll notice that some of the images that have, locks like I do, you can look in the background and see they're not really historical. Not like this one or, some of these. And that's because I suspect that there's not a whole lot. Remember, we train the AI by our interaction. There are probably not a whole lot of Western images with Black women for them to come up with a historical look. Now, how much time would it have taken if I had gone to an artist or a graphic designer and say, I want to create, these kind of images? Not 30 minutes by just looking at, selfies, 15 selfies. So this is what drives what I care about inside of the AI community. I care about bias, especially if you're going to be in the recruiting, hiring function. Just like I know that I don't look like most of those images that it fed back to me, I want to make sure AI is looking at people in the right way. So I care about bias and ethics and inclusion and the demographic impact, and I care about frameworks for change, and I want to make sure I see us doing AI that's going to screen people in versus screening people out. But I also want to make sure that these systems are populated with the right data so that it can give me a response that looks like me rather than, some of these images that some of these, and these are this is only a very small sampling. But I wanted to make this point about these images as well, the speed at which they can be produced. Now, in our society, the professionals who develop code, who would write computer code to generate these images, even 5 years ago, 4 years, 3 years ago, are some of the highest paid people. Look at the Department of Labor and they'll tell you software engineers, software developers, programmers, those are the high paying positions in our economy. One of the things I want you to take away from this is high paying positions will also be impacted by AI. Because remember, the motive in a lot of cases is about labor cost. It's about how can I get this done without hiring an artist who's going to render each and every one of these things. Now, there's some benefits also in that I could never imagine myself as a flapper girl, but bottom second from right is a flapper person. My hair is wrong, but generally that may be how my face looks. That doesn't look to me like a Black woman, like I know I am. So these are the things that we're going to have to kind of stay on top of, and we're going to have to choose. But we also need to recognize that some of what we've heard about who might, be displaced isn't necessarily what could happen. Because if you're a thinking person, you know that to generate the code, nobody sat down and wrote the code to generate 125 images of me in 30 minutes. That's all machines doing that. And so we have to be concerned not only about positions or work that we think is low-skilled work, but work that we think is high-skilled work. And in the HR function, we call it knowledge work, the kind of work that requires thinking and creativity and decision-making that, everything is game. And so we have to decide what it is that we care about and what is it that we're going to focus our energies on in the AI game. We cannot individually look at all of it, but we have to pick out the things that are important to us. And as I said, these are the things that I care about. And so when I approach a conversation about AI, I'm not talking about AI in general. These are the things that I want to be front and center on. And so action 3 is for you to create your own framework for how you will respond and work towards creating your own personal I care statement or list. You know, do you care about the environment, healthcare disparities, education, climate change, politics? It doesn't matter what it is. You just need to know you want to own and understand what is happening in your space. I call it minding your business. Seriously. So the HBCU Career Center, we came up with what we think is a framework, a reasonable framework that we can educate people on in terms of how it is that they approach coming up with their own I care statements. And the framework that we're looking at is the 3 R's: regroup, research, ramp up. Why do we say regroup? Because I want us to move away from the, oh my gosh, this is a nuclear explosion that's going to destroy us. And I want us to start thinking of, this is a festival of lights opportunity. How do I put myself into it? So regrouping means I hear the hype, but I want to know what's happening in my space. I want to know what's real, because no matter how old you are in the US, you know, it's not hard to find out that we had a tech boom that went bust, that we had crypto was really, really hot, and then crypto was really, really not. Google Glasses, Amazon Fire Phones, prior AI cycles that haven't worked. So you want to have a certain reasonableness in your approach, but you also want to focus intently on what is real. Not just what you heard, but what is real for your business. Mind your business. And this is a question we have to ask ourselves. Am I minding my business, or am I talking about AI in abstract? Because I really need to bring it closer to us as individuals and as, you know, as humans who are participating in the change. Let me just take a look at what's happening in chat. Dr. Geddes, I just love your participation here. April, thank you for sharing. Let's see here. K through 12 education industry really needs this. Students are more of the technology than the teachers. You know what, April, I'm going to challenge you on that sometimes. One of the studies that I did, maybe when I worked at Cheney University, I'm going to plug Cheney. When I worked at Cheney, I did a study and I had all the freshmen participate because I was concerned that there was a disconnect between, we would see students with their phones all the time. We would see them with their phones. And then I went to industry and I asked industry, when these people graduate and come into your organizations, we see them with phones all the time. Are they capable of doing certain things professionally? And then we also went and we asked college seniors. I think that year I surveyed 75 college seniors. And many of the things, the technology things that we thought they might be great at, they really weren't. They were using the phones as entertainment tools, as communication tools, but not necessarily in the same way that we would want them to use it in an education sense, for example. And so when we asked, I think I had maybe 75 seniors do a survey, they also were uncomfortable with their knowledge of, how to do a video call, how to do a video interview. And this was, maybe 7 years ago. So I'm not sure if this has changed, but the fact that many students will appear and maybe even want to make you think that, hey, teach or professor, I know this better than you. They do not. They can access the information, but can they filter it? And so is it useful to them? And that's why there's so much, somebody mentioned my Caribbean accent earlier. That's why there's so much foolishness on the internet. And one of the things that concerns me is that this foolishness is being used to train AI tools. And so I was at a conference the other day, and this AI expert said, people who are thinking that, oh, I don't want to participate, I'm going to stay out of it. It's no, I want to participate because I want to put sensible, smart images of Western, senior women in the AI database so that when it's learning, it's also learning about these kinds of different kinds of people. So do we program in counter bias? And maybe what I probably just said, Dr. Geddes, is probably the best answer I have to that, is that we have been participants in the process. Maybe we need to be more purposeful now about what we put into the process, and not move certain things along if we know them to be not true. I read a UPenn professor a couple of days ago, and he was saying, we need to know that ChatGPT is going to be wrong, like 85% of the time. And we have to correct it. And it's one of the things I talk about when I'm talking to like new college graduates, and everybody's out there saying, oh yeah, use ChatGPT to write your resume. I'm at the conference and I'm talking to all these companies who have all these ChatGPT tools or these natural language tools that are writing resumes. And the first vendor that I went up to, he hands me a sample resume, and I'm looking at it, and he's speaking with a really strong accent. And so I said to him, what does this word mean? This word on your resume, on the sample resume? And he started to laugh. He didn't know what the word meant. And so one of the things I know I've tried to say to new graduates is use that ChatGPT, but make sure you understand every word that's on your document. Use it to help you write that report, but make sure you double check every data point. Make sure you know what every word in your document means. So it requires that we not be bystanders of the technology, but that we become active participants, because we've been participating. We just now want to purposefully participate. I'm looking at Teacher or Titra. Many clients have no business case for AI and no clue to implement. Further, no one has an answer on how to eliminate bias from AI. You're absolutely right. 5 years ago, when I was doing my dissertation, everything I read said AI has the promise. AI could potentially. Fast forward a couple of years, and Amazon was working on a hiring tool using AI, and they scrapped it. I think it's in 2019, because they realized that, well, all the data that they had inside of Amazon showed them that 95% of their software developers were men anyway. And so if you're going to now use AI to go out and recruit based on what you have, you're just going to get more of what you have. So Amazon scrapped their, tool. Even today, I'm still reading where it says, oh, it has the potential, and they're glitches, and we're going to have to work those out. Well, those won't get worked out unless we actually stay on top of it and make sure it gets worked out, and make sure our legislators, not mess with hiring laws until certain parameters are met. But that's a good point. We're always going to hear, oh, it has the promise to eliminate bias, but it's kind of like, when will it get there? When will we trust that it's there? All good points. Oh, no, sorry. Part of the research that you have to do once you've regrouped is you have to research on the inside. And I love this, Denzel Washington's son graphic lookalike. I don't remember his name, the ATL guy. But you want to research on the inside. One of the tools we talk about at the HBCU Career Center all the time is understanding what we call your real visa, your real moneymaker, the real thing that's going to, help you build successful careers. Is you have to understand your values, your interests, your skills, and your abilities. And so when you start researching AI as it relates to your role and your work, you want to keep these things front and center. What do I value in the work that I'm going to be doing? If I value, being effective with my time, I might decide that I really want to get an AI tool that's going to help me not do repetitive things because repetition bores me, So really think about what you value, what your interests are, what your skills are, and what your potential, what your abilities are, what can you learn so that you can. If somebody had told me that I could go back to school at the age of 50 plus to go do doctoral research, I'd have been like, no. But it was necessary. It was necessary. And when I had my kids saying to me, Mom, why don't you go do this thing? You have to think, am I even capable of doing that at this time? Yeah. And that's one of the questions that I got a lot of was, people saying, I'm over 40. I can't, I just want to hang in there. I'm not at the beginning of my career, but I'm not at the end. You have a lot of opportunity to do change making kind of work between now and when you're ready to retire, if you ever retire. It's never too late to go learn something new, stretch those abilities, and be that person willing to say, hey, I'm going to try that, because I want to stay in the game. Not only do I want to stay in the game, I care about this thing that I'm working on. And, my perspective is that, if you find a thing that you care about and you become a carer of that thing, to me, that's where happy careers come from. So in addition to researching on the inside, you have to research on the outside, just like with the Deloitte, Human Capital Trends Report. That's their whole thing. They're forecasting, they're looking ahead. Well, you have to do that for your own industry. You have to do that for your own profession. This analysis tool, you've probably heard of SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. This is an analysis tool that I like to recommend because I think it applies even to your career, your job, your industry. And it's called a PESTEL analysis. You'll see it spelled PEST, L-E, PESTEL. You'll see people spell it steeple. But in any event, this is what these 6 letters stand for. You're going to be looking on the outside, and you're going to be looking at the political landscape. We hear a lot of talk, on Capitol Hill. They're trying to do something about tech. They're trying to get involved with AI. I don't know if they can, but things like taxation, tax policy, monetary policy, antitrust, is Google going to acquire Microsoft or vice versa? And what does that do for us as consumers? If we're in the middle of trying to figure out bias in AI, is your government going to support certain kinds of, acquisitions of companies? But we also know that, in the political arena, there are lots of tech leaders, including the leader of OpenAI, who created ChatGPT, who is calling for some kind of regulatory response from the government. So the politics play a part. And you want to take a look at your industry and see what's happening in the through the political lens. You want to look at what's happening in the economic lens. We hear talk of a recession. We go back and forth on talk of a recession. What will happen in a recession when we come out of a recession? Are we going to hire as many people back, or is that the opportunity for people to be replaced by technology? Under legitimate guise of, the economy is bad. So let's find a way to use more automation. What does that mean long term? The social impact, the demographics, that's a big one for me. Is everybody going to be have the same kind of input? When you work in Silicon Valley and you create software that's supposed to dispense coffee from a coffee machine, but if I put my black hand holding a cup under the dispenser, it doesn't recognize that I'm there because they weren't taking how my black hand might, react with the photo systems in there. These are real things. So I get concerned about making sure demographic groups are represented fairly. Lifestyle, attitudes, public opinion. How are these things going to inform the information that's put out there, and therefore the information that I'm going to get and have to double check out of ChatGPT or any of those or a Bing, question. The technological piece. How are they investing? What are they investing in? Which industries are putting money into AI? I think the expectation is that by 2024, companies will be putting $110 billion into AI. Come 2024, we want to check, did they overshoot that number? Did they go below it? What technologies are failing in the process? How many companies are scrapping their hiring tools? You want to be aware of those kinds of things. How many, big promises about AI being able to cure all kinds of illnesses or collect enough data to cure illnesses? How much of that is being realized? How fast is the technology coming out so that it's moving pretty fast. But what does that mean to me in my industry, in my job, in my work? Environmental issues, climate events, pandemic, risk management. All of these things are going to give you some kind of insight into what's out there. And so once you've done the work on yourself and you know what you want, then you start looking at places as to, okay, how is that going to be impacted by it? And of course, there are legal ramifications of everything. If you're in higher ed, we're scrambling now based on, new SCOTUS rulings about affirmative action. And what does that mean? That we back away? No, it means that we double down and create other ways to scrutinize, who gets enrolled and who gets left behind. So one of the things that we're going to do with this after this session is we're going to send you out materials. I think I said it before, and give you a worksheet that has a pastel in there and have you work through, maybe work through a sample so you can see, for example, what if I were to do a pastel analysis on the retail sector. And then, you can work on your own industry. In terms of ramping up, here's what Eric Brynjolfsson, who is a serious writer about AI and robotics, says. Employees, like businesses, must stay agile enough to pivot through the future of growing pains of a radically reorganized economy. And he said this before COVID. We all know how COVID has further reorganized our economy. So that ramping up is not a one-time thing. It's a continuous thing. Businesses are going to ramp up. Yes, they're going to be spending $110 billion by 2024 because their goal is to increase sales, lower costs, do things like detect fraud, improve customer experiences, automate work processes. provide predictive analytics that will help them manage their businesses more effectively. They want to improve safety, and they want to manage the big chunks of data that we're feeding to it with our, every time we make a purchase through Amazon, we're feeding Amazon data. And, I'll go look at something and it will come back to me and say, hey, based on what you've bought before, here's the size of this that you should be buying. We are participating, but know that businesses are looking at us as we participate in these things. We have to be looking at ourselves, and we have to be ramping up ourselves. We have to be looking at what are the lifelong learning skills. I have to have an orientation to continuous learning. Always be looking at, where can I find more about this? Where can I do this? Can I get on a new project team at work because they're going to explore this? What are my hard skills? What are those skills that I have that AI can't mimic? I always, when I think about myself and that I started my professional life as an air traffic controller, there were things that I learned how to do, like, keep a lot of things literally in the air at the same time. And that's a behavior that I've taken with me, regardless of which job I've had. It's that ability to zero in on something and then go back and look at it at 32,000 feet and come back down. And, so think about those hard skills that you have. Where is my sweet spot? Where do I want to fit in? Where do I see an opening that I want to jump into? What's my domain? For example, I'm an HR professional. My domain is higher ed. I can be an HR professional and my domain be ski resorts, or, broadcasting, or, in media. So it's not just the skills that you have, is where do you want to use them? Am I switching or am I staying? If I'm staying, what does that look like? If I'm switching, what does that look like? Can I pivot right where I am? If I notice that they're consolidating jobs, okay, what other thing can I take on and give something to AI? What problems do I want to solve with my life? What domains do I really care about? Where do I want to play? And am I making that commitment to hype? And at the HBCU Career Center, we consider hype to be honest, yearly, personal evaluations. You have to do it regularly. You have to be checking in regularly. Am I on the right track? What am I doing? Am I going to conferences? What am I doing? What am I, who am I talking to? What am I exploring? All about me, not about what AI is doing in general, but how it's coming into my space. These points came out of my doctoral research. And these were statements that were made by some of the HR professionals that I interviewed. And you could easily scratch out HR and put any profession in there and ask some of the same questions. Would you make those same statements right now? Like HR job duties could be tweaked or modified. Can the bank manager's jobs be tweaked or modified, and how? These are questions that you can, ask as part of your evaluation of, should I stay or should I move? HR jobs would not change because their companies were slow adopters anyway. This was an HR professional saying this to me, oh, we know it's coming, but we aren't going to change because we're usually slow. Well, COVID came along and we could no longer afford to be slow. So if you were to change that to the industry that you're in, how would that sound to you right now? HR employees will be needed to help design, audit, and monitor new AI systems. Take out HR and put any other profession right there. Absolutely, we are going to need people to design, audit, and monitor new systems. Like I said, that professor from UPenn said, it's wrong 85% of the time. There is so much incorrect data out there, somebody's going to have to be monitoring and checking that we're not violating certain things. Is there a role for you in that in your industry? So you, just like you can check your profession, you can check your role. You know, here were recruiters who were closest to the change saying, oh, recruiters would not be replaced by machines. I don't know what they're saying now, 5 years later. Certain administrative tasks could be performed by AI assistants like Alexa. You know, at the time when I was doing my study, you had executive staff that didn't have an admin assistant, but was chatting to Alexa all the time to help them manage schedules, etc. Recruiters who do not adopt AI could become obsolete. Do that with your role. And one on this page that I wanted to point out was where this person said HR knowledge work jobs, like recruiting, are not like manufacturing jobs that can easily be replaced. Would we still say this 5 years later? Would you say that about your own profession right now? I can't tell about every profession. You're in it, you want to be closer to it and look for these things. Here's what I think ultimately. If we are wise in this new age of AI, we will stay aware or woke, and we will keep exploring while we protect the things that we care about. We will discover creative new ways to manifest that care through our work. It requires that we no longer be a bystander to it. It requires that we understand that we're the ones doing the training. It requires that we understand that there are amazing possibilities and there are potentially amazing challenges. But it requires all of us to actually get deeper into our spaces and mind our business. Mind our business.